In this video, we're going to look at how to sample selected observations from a data set that is a data frame. And we will start with first setting the default folder where data files are. And we went over this in one of the previous videos where we can do this by going to session and choosing the directory. And once you have done that, and you can copy the command that appears in the console and keep it in a text file, so we can copy paste that every time we start a new R code file. So that's the command that I've already copy pasted here. So we run that. Then we will load the data file, and notice here that this is an option that we've included so that any variable that has character as values like strings, okay, will come in as a factor. And again, we talked about this in one of the previous videos. So there it is. Okay, so now we're going to do a sample, a random sample. Okay, say 5 observations from this file. So the file has 5,802 observations, and let's suppose that we want to just sample 5 of them. Okay, there are a couple of ways of doing this, and I'm going to first go over how this is done in your textbook, where the textbook looks at the row name. So if you look at the data, then you see what you see here. Okay, this is called the row names. Okay, by default, this is set to numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. And you can change those row names if you like, but usually we won't do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to select randomly select 5 row names, and then we will sample those rows as our sample. So this is the command for that. We're going to set selected row names into a variable called s, and the code for selecting a sample, and that's part of the base, meaning the base R. Okay, and then we say, okay, what do you want to sample? We want to sample row names. Row names of what? Row names of our housing.df data frame. Okay, so next is how many rows you want to sample. So here, let's say 5 rows. Okay, now if you run this, okay, then the sample code will select 5 row names at random. Okay, so now you see there are 5 of them, and since the row names are numbers in this case, the 5 selected numbers are displayed. So if we have actual row names, the row names will be there, or I mean string values as row names, and those row names will appear there. So now we want to select those rows. Okay, so we're not going to save it into a different data frame. We just want to look at how it is done. So now you say housing.df, and then we will select these rows. And remember, when you want to select rows, we have to do this in square bracket. You say S. Okay, remember, housing.df is a 2-dimensional data frame, so we have rows and columns. So we have said we want to select the rows in S. Now we have to say what columns we want. And if we want all the columns, we just simply say comma and then leave the column portion as nothing. So that means everything will be selected. So now if you run this, and you see those 5 rows are displayed. And of course, if you want to save this into a data frame, then you would do that here, and then it will be available to you. Now, sometimes you may want to do what is called oversampling. Oversampling means you want to select some rows that is specified by some condition more often than the others. Okay. For example, here we have rooms, right? All right, so we have number of rooms. Suppose we want to sample houses with more than 10 rooms more often. Okay, that's like stratified sample. You want, say, of 90% chance for rows with more than 10 rooms, okay, a 10% chance for the rest of them, okay, for example. So if that's what you want over, in data mining, this is called oversampling. Okay, so oversampling, we will use the same S here. Okay, now again we do sample, right, and then row names. Okay, row names from housing DF. Okay, so now we want to specify, say, how many rows you want to sample. Say, for example, you want to sample, say, 20 rows. Okay. All right. So this is what we did previously, right? This was it. These are the two things that is necessary. But then there is a bunch of more optional parameters that we can specify, and one of the optional parameters is the probability. Okay, and the probability, so now we want to set the probability of getting selected if rooms are greater than 10 to be 0.9, otherwise 0.10, right? And we can do this using a code called if else. Okay, this is like in Excel, we have an if function, right? If, and within the brackets you will have three things. The condition is the first one. The second is the value for if the condition is true, and the third parameter is if the value if the condition is not true. So same thing here. So if else, right? So first parameter is the condition. So we want to see whether housing DF, okay, when we want to look at rooms, right? So $sign rooms, okay, and we want to see whether this is greater than 10. So that's the condition, and if the condition is true, it's 0.9. If the condition is not true, 0.1. Okay, but we want this to be used for probability of a row getting selected. So I forgot that. So we need to do probabilities. So probability equal to, and then you specify that. Okay. Okay. So now we have selected the row numbers. Okay, so 20 of them, and now next is to sample those rows. So we have housing.df square bracket s comma. So now that will now select those 20, and of these the rows with more than 10 for rooms will get selected more often than relative to if you're done just randomly without looking at the rooms at all. So the rooms greater than 10 will be oversampled relative to just simple random sampling.